Today we're talking about why progress feels invisible and why that doesn't mean it isn't there. We'll start with a story. We'll talk about how progress is quieter and smaller than we expect and why comparison makes all of this harder. I'm going to tell you about something I did for over a year without realizing I'd actually built the foundation for something, which sounds strange, but you'll see. And I'll leave you with a question to think about. This one's all about quiet progress. So if you've been feeling stuck or feeling behind in life, like the thing you're doing just doesn't feel like enough yet, this one's for you. Welcome to The Steady Becoming. We already know most of what we need to grow. We know that focus matters, small things done repeatedly add up, and we get better as we go. We know it, we just forget it when it counts. This show is the reminder that what works is often simple and often steady. I'm your host, Miriam. This is episode 3, and this one is a reminder that the becoming is already happening, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when it doesn't look like it. Even when you really genuinely argue that no, it is not. Okay, so before the story, I just want to say something first. If you're listening to this and you have this feeling, like this low-level background feeling that you're a little bit behind, that other people are further along than you, that you've been meaning to really commit to something and you haven't quite gotten there yet, or that the thing you're doing just doesn't feel like enough. I hear that. And I think that feeling is so common because you care. You're paying attention to yourself, to your own growth. You're not just coasting. But that means you're also very aware of the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That feeling makes sense. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't, and I'm not going to tell you to just trust the process either. This isn't about waiting. It's about looking at what's already there. And if you're right at the very beginning, that's okay too. This will still be helpful. But this one is especially for the person who's already quietly at it and feeling behind. I want to offer you something to think about today, because I think there's a really good chance you've been getting something wrong about that feeling of being behind. Not wrong in the way like that it's your fault. Wrong in a way that is just very human and very easy to do. And the story I'm about to share is the best way I know how to show you what I mean. There was a woman who kept her grandmother's letters in a shoebox under the bed, between a rusted tin she'd never opened and a pair of boots she kept meaning to re-sole. The letters were in her grandmother's language, which the woman did not speak. So the woman was learning it late, in the way adults learn things late. A worn grammar book, a few minutes at a time, in the quiet before the house woke. Some evenings, she would take one letter from the box and translate it. A paragraph, sometimes two. The work was slow. She wrote her translations on the back of old correspondence she was finished with. Scraps she was discarding because it did not feel like work worth using good paper on. She kept them in a folder that she never named. It had grown thick without her noticing. Once, when she moved it to make room in the drawer, she put it under a stack of old receipts without looking inside. She did not know if it would ever amount to anything. The first winter, she looked up the same words so many times she began to recognize them before she found their meaning. The letters were not dramatic. Grocery concerns, A neighbor's bad behavior. Once, a long passage about a coat, whether to have it relined or sell it and buy new. The woman translated that letter 3 times and was still not certain she had it right. The second winter, she moved through a letter without stopping. A short one, nothing complicated. She put it in the folder and made her supper. There was a phrasing her grandmother favored, a small qualifying word that softened the whole statement into something not quite decided. One such passage read, "The neighbor's apology one might perhaps accept." For months, the woman had to stop and work it out each time. Then, one evening, she felt it coming before it arrived. She did not call this progress. It felt too slow and too private for that word. She reached for the grammar book one evening and stopped. She had not needed it in several weeks. That spring, her mother's family gathered the way they did every few years. Too many people in a small house. The table extended into the hallway. The smell of something that had been cooking since morning. Her aunt was telling a story in her grandmother's tongue, gesturing with her whole arm, the way women in that family did. A joke folded into the grammar. The woman laughed. A moment later, she heard herself. She stood there with her drink. She had laughed before she translated. There had been nothing to translate. That night, she wrote on good paper. Okay, so I want to make sure something lands here before we go anywhere else, because I think it's easy to hear that ending and think, oh, the party's where it happened. The laugh is the moment she became fluent. Like, that was the breakthrough. But, of course, it wasn't. That's not when she became fluent. She became fluent in those 2 winters, in the quiet before the house woke up, in the grocery concerns and the neighbor's bad behavior, and the coat that she translated like 3 times and still wasn't sure she had right. In the folder she never named that got thick without her noticing. In the moments when she looked up the same word for what felt like the 100th time. That's when it happened. The family party, the laugh, that was just the first time she noticed what had already been built. She didn't become fluent at the party. She just found out at the party. And I think that's a really, really important distinction. Because I think most of us are waiting for our party moment, waiting for the thing that confirms it's real. And what this story is saying, and what I want to spend the rest of this episode really getting into, is that the work you've been doing that you haven't called progress yet, I think it's more real than you've been giving it credit for. And I want to show you how to actually look at it. So let's talk about it. Okay, so the main thing I want to say, and this is something I think about a lot, is that progress is so much quieter than we think it should be. And I mean, not like, oh, progress happens slowly, be patient. I mean the actual individual moments where you're getting better at something. They're so small that they sometimes don't even register when they're happening. You just take them and then you move on. And you don't think that was progress because it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like nothing. And that's why progress feels invisible. Like when the woman in the story recognized a word before she looked it up. That's it. That's the moment. She recognized a word. And she probably just thought, I knew that one, and kept going. Or, more likely, maybe wouldn't even notice at all. She didn't sit back and think, wow, I'm making progress. Why would she? It's one word. It's tiny. It doesn't even feel worth noting. But I think that's actually what progress is made of. Those tiny moments where something clicks a little more than it did last time. And we just miss them. We dismiss them as they happen, and we don't even realize we're doing it. I think the bar we've set for what counts as progress is way higher than what progress actually is. And here's the thing. And look, I'm a bit of a nerd about this stuff. Like, small progress genuinely excites me and makes me so happy. The thing is, the work was building the whole time. Before she noticed it, before the party, before anyone else could see it, it was already there. She was becoming fluent on those scraps of paper she didn't think were worth anything. That folder she put under the receipts without looking inside. That's where it was happening. And actually, I want to talk about that folder for a second. The one she never named that got thick without her noticing. She put it under a stack of receipts without even looking inside. And it was full. It was already full. That's the thing about invisible progress. It's so quiet that it accumulates without you realizing it. You don't notice it building. You just look up one day and it's there. And I think you probably have a version of that folder right now. Something you're building or learning or doing in the margins of your day that you haven't named yet, that you've been treating like scrap paper. And I think if you actually look at what's there before any big confirming moment, you're going to find more than you've been counting. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples from real life because I don't want this to feel abstract. Okay, say you've been doing a running practice. You're getting up early, doing the intervals, going back out, even when it's cold and you don't feel like it. And it still doesn't feel like you're a runner. You're out of breath. You need to stop and walk for a while. You're still checking to see how much time is left. You feel like the progress just isn't showing up the way you expected. And I think that going back, every single time you go back, every morning, that's what's building it. We just don't count the going back. And that's the part that matters most. Okay, say you're writing a novel or a memoir. Okay, side note, I love to read. If I could retire and read all day, I would totally do that. And honestly, I have so much respect for the people who write full novels. How do you do that? And there are writers who put out more than one per year. And I'm just seriously, how? Books are so amazing. Anyway, say you're writing a novel and you sit down and you write, and most days it feels like you barely moved the needle. The draft is still so far from what you have in your head. And you close the laptop and you're not sure if it's getting better or if you're just generating more words. And you kind of wonder if you're actually a person who finishes things. But I think that probably every time you sit down, you understand your story a little more than you did before. The characters are getting more real. You're learning what the book actually wants to be, which is different from what you thought it was when you started. That's not nothing. That's actually where most of the learning is. You're just too close to see it. And those two examples, the runner and the writer, they might look at each other and think the other one has it more together. Because I think we always assume that other people's process looks cleaner than ours does from the inside. But it doesn't. Everyone is in the middle of their own quiet, messy, unglamorous version of this. Okay, so comparison, because I think this makes all of it harder. When you look around and it seems like other people are further along, more consistent, more visible, more, I don't know, just more, it's really easy to use that as evidence that you're behind. Like, they're posting about it and it looks polished and together, and you're still over here, like, wondering if it's working. But everyone is on a completely different path, at a completely different point on that path. And when you see someone else's progress, especially online, you're almost never seeing the messy middle. You're seeing the moment it finally showed up. You're not seeing everything that came before it. Like the runner scrolling someone else's race times. That's not a fair comparison. She's looking at their race day and comparing it to her 6 a.m. intervals in the cold. So I don't think the comparison is fair, like at all. It's just not. You're looking at their highlight and comparing it to your behind the scenes. Of course it's going to feel like you're behind. Okay, so I know there are probably some questions coming up for you right now, because they come up for me too when I think about this stuff. So let me try to address them. The first one is probably something like, okay, but how do I actually know if I'm making progress? Like, what if I'm just telling myself this to feel better and I'm actually not moving? And honestly, I think about that too. What helped me was just actually looking at what's there. Not what I wished were there, not what I thought should be there, and also not glossing over or dismissing what is there, but what was actually there. Because I think if you really look, you'll find more than you've been counting. Like, if you're writing that novel, what's actually there? How many pages exist that weren't there 6 months ago? That's your honest inventory. That's what you're looking for. And that's different from telling yourself a story about it. That's just accurate accounting. The second thing that might come up for you is something like, I've been at this for a really long time, and genuinely, nothing has shown up. And I get that. If that's where you are, the first question is whether you've actually looked at what's there, which is what this episode is all about. And if you've done that honestly and still nothing, it might be that the step is too big. And that's not a character flaw. I'm going to do a whole episode on that, so stay tuned. For now, if that's where you are, I see you, and that episode is coming. Okay, so when I think back, this actually happened to me. I was building something without counting it. And I think it's going to make this feel more concrete in a way the examples don't quite do on their own. So my husband and I go for a walk on the trail near our house as a break from work. We go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, late morning. And since we work from home and I usually just eat at my desk, it's just really good to take a break, get out of the house for a bit. Anyway, at some point, probably 2 years ago, I started scheduling some exercises right before our walk. Just sit-ups, arm circles, yoga type stretching. Nothing serious, just half an hour before we headed out. It was just a thing I started doing. And here's the thing. I never thought of it as a workout habit. I never put that label on it. If someone asked me, do you work out? My answer would have been no. I was just trying to get some movement into my day. It was just a little thing I was doing. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't track it. I didn't put it in a special app or anything. It was just a thing I did before our walk. Then, about a year later, I signed up with a nutritionist and trainer. She's someone I've known since probably high school and maybe even before that. She works online through an app, so you can do all the workouts at home. Now, I'm all about small improvements over time, as you can probably tell by this show's name. So, a complete overhaul of my lifestyle is just something I know is going to backfire for me. In that way, I know myself. So I was actually kind of hesitant to sign up because I thought, this is going to be too much at once and I'm going to crash. But as I was talking to her about her program, something clicked. I realized, oh, I already have a habit of working out. She would just be giving me a better way to do it, an actual plan to replace what I was already doing. And that was such a weird realization because I genuinely had not thought of what I was doing as a habit. It was just a thing I did before the walk. But when I looked at it, it was 3 times a week for a year already carved into my schedule. That's a habit. That's a real thing I had built. I just hadn't counted it. And that's when it hit me. I already had a habit. I just hadn't called it that. The thing I'd been doing without really thinking of it as anything had set me all the way up for this. Even still, tracking food plus eating by macros, that was a lot of change at once, and I felt it. But having that time already carved into my day for the workouts made it so much more manageable. I just replaced the little exercises I was doing with real ones. And honestly, I kind of look forward to it now. The last week or two, I've been listening to podcasts while I work out, which makes it even more fun. But the infrastructure was already there because I'd been building it without counting it. And when I noticed it, I was just sitting there trying to figure out if the program made sense for me, and it just hit me. Oh, I already have this. So what I want to say is, you don't need someone to tell you. You don't need a trainer or a party or some big confirming moment. You can just look on purpose right now and find it yourself. So here's what I keep coming back to with all of this. The invisible part, the quiet, not worth counting part, is where it's been building. Not the moment you notice it. Not the moment someone else confirms it. And when you actually look at it, you'll find more than you thought. She didn't become fluent at the party. She became fluent in the 2 winters. And you, whatever you're working on, you're in it right now. And that's not nothing. That's the whole thing. So, here's what I want to leave you with. What are you already doing that you're not counting? Not what you wish you were doing, not what you're planning to start. What is already there? The small, quiet, unofficial thing you've been doing that you haven't called progress yet. The thing that you're doing on scrap paper. It might come to mind right away, or it might not. You might catch yourself as you're doing it this week and realize, oh, just like I did with the exercises. But take a minute now to think about it. Okay, so before I let you go, the quiet work is real. The invisible progress is still progress. It's actually where most of it happens. You're not behind because it's not visible yet. You're building. You're on your own path at your own point. Someone else's visible progress doesn't tell you anything about yours. And you don't need a big moment to confirm it for you. You can look for it yourself, right now. The folder you haven't named yet. It's already thick. You just haven't looked inside. Okay, a couple of things before I wrap up. If this episode resonated, if you've got someone in your life who's been at something quietly and needs to hear that it counts, send this to them. That's genuinely how shows like this find the right people. If you're not already following or subscribed, go ahead and do that wherever you're listening. It's free, and it just means you won't miss the next one. This is The Steady Becoming. Around here, we don't burn it down. We adjust, and we keep going. And when you do, there's no telling the ripple effect on you and quietly on everyone around you. You got this.